back around when we have these conversations. Now, I'll tell you guys the Ballad of Scuba Steve here tonight. That seems like a good place, a good smooth segue to cut this and start it as the next video. So I'm just going to repeat that line and then actually tell the story, because I can go in and edit this later on, as in edit it in like 2 years or whatever. Now it'll be like tomorrow or whatever. Anyway, so I'm going to tell you guys the Ballad of Scuba Steve here tonight. Now, to anybody that's not familiar with him, he's one of the local legends of Keystone. He's one of the townspeople of Factoryville. And nobody's quite sure of his origins, but they're troubled, to say the least. Okay? Imagine, if you will, Santa Claus, except wearing beat-to-shit old jeans, like a t-shirt that might have fit him 20 pounds ago, reeking of stale beer, and without any of the magic that Santa Claus brings. And then you'll have Scuba Steve in your mind's eye. Okay? And Scuba Steve basically is the town drunk. You know, we don't need to glorify it. He's had various substance abuse issues, presumably. And curiously, nobody knows what his last name actually is. Nobody knows who he is. He's just kind of a man without a home, I guess. And whenever there would be some kind of event on campus, usually involving food and usually involving girls, Scuba Steve would appear. It was as if he was summoned out of the ether, some shit like that. So one very memorable incident I had with him, I was working as a security guard at the time, and it was the senior luau. So it only came but once a year. It was a special event where the seniors on campus were allowed to get trashed and play loud music, and they'd like order pizza, and like shitty Sodexo food would come out, like, you know, everything you'd expect from a Keystone party. There ain't no party like a Keystone party. So there we were. It was me and my coworker DJ. And as we were there, you know, just chatting up, you know, some of our friends, Scuba Steve shambled in. And he was in rare form, as he was every time we saw him. He was making a lot of people uncomfortable. So we got asked to escort him off campus, as we always did. And this was kind of a recurring thing. You know, when he found out my name was Steve, we were like that instantly. He loved it. He was saying that shit to me 2 years ago. Oh, Steve, how you doing? And that's how he was. He was overjoyed to see me sometimes. And in the course of him being incoherent and just talking random nonsense, he told me some very spooky stories about Keystone. And one of the things that you'll actually see him do if you hang around on campus, he walks around and he blesses the college. Okay? So he's got a beer in one hand, and with his other hand, he's like making the sign of the cross at a building. And he goes, I bless this college. God bless Keystone. And he says stuff like that. So one night, I kind of pulled him aside, and we started talking. You know, I had gotten a call like, get this guy off our campus. You know, he's a security threat, whatever. I was used to this by now. So I'm talking with Scuba, and he's like, I'm going over there to the library. It's haunted. I bless the library. I bless Keystone. And he went through it with me with like all the buildings, like Ward Hall. It's fucking haunted. I bless this college. And he did this to every building that he saw. Okay. And at the end of this, he kind of did this display whenever you would walk up to him and talk. I really don't think he ever meant anybody harm. I think he was just a very fucked up and lonely old guy. Like, I feel bad for him in a lot of ways. I think about him occasionally. So he starts telling me these stories about Keystone ghosts and all this stuff. And, you know, this building's haunted, that building's haunted, and he's going on, he's carrying on. He's not making any sense. So he gets right up in my face, like he comes right up to me. And if any of you know Scuba, or if you have a family member who drinks, that's not a pleasant smell. It smells like death. And he just starts telling me this story. He goes, you know, the other day I was back there in the woods,
and I saw where the old bridge used to be, and there are these lanterns going across the bridge.
And he stopped making sense. I didn't know what he was saying. So I'm just laughing. I'm just nodding, like trying to gently coax him off of Keystone's property as he's telling me the stories. And then he goes,
so after I got up past the bridge there, I got up to where the old railroad platform is.
Now I'm thinking to myself, like, this guy is just delusional. Like, he's just full of shit. But you entertain him, you let him tell his story. He's way more cooperative. When you tried to fight with him, that's when you got into problems. You just had to laugh and smile and say, yeah, Scuba. And he would generally be pretty amenable to whatever you're trying to get him to do. So he goes to me,
I got up to the old railroad platform, and then I saw them.
And he stops, like, he's obviously waiting for me to say, like, what did you see? So I did. I was like, who?
He goes, I saw them up there. It was the lady in red and the lady in white and their two kids. And their two kids were throwing a ball back and forth. And they were up by the old train platform. And I was watching them, and when I got up to them, they were gone.
So I heard this, and I was like, okay. That's my typical reaction when people tell me ghost stories. Okay, great. So, it's a couple days later. We're on shift again. It's me and my buddy DJ. We're walking on the back campus because that's a classic place for kids to hang out and, smoke a bowl or do whatever they're doing back there. So it's a common thing. We kind of had to keep an eye on that. So we go back there, and as we're walking in the woods, I'm telling DJ this story that Scuba had woven for me. And I'm like, yeah, he was making up some shit about a bridge and this train platform and all this stuff. And I get up there, and there's just like these big mossy chunks of concrete on the edge of one of the ravines back there. And I walk up to it, and I look on the other side of the ravine, and there's another one. I was like, wait a second. Is that bridge he was talking about? Like, hasn't been there in a long time, but it was definitely there. So I'm thinking, yeah, that's kind of weird. So I keep walking up, and where they had just redone the trail, actually, there's a little drain, and it makes a cool waterfall when it rains enough. And we're standing there. DJ wants to smoke a cigarette, so he's sitting on the little drain, smoking whatever. And I look, and I notice that there's a little rectangle of like just that mossy concrete kind of thing. And as I was standing there, I realized this used to be a trolley track before it was Keystone, before it was this little like trail, whatever. This is probably that rail platform he was talking about. And it was very weird because from that point I started to think to myself, maybe Scuba Steve's not as crazy or as delusional as we think he is. Maybe he's been here longer than all of us and he has some kind of wisdom to offer. So it was a couple months later, time passed. And one night it was me and DJ again, because it's me and DJ in most of these stories. I only had 3 total coworkers. And we were down in Brooks Theater. We were in the design lab. And it was time for lockup. It was time to close her down for the night. And it's me and him, and it's this other kid named Liam, who we were pretty good friends with. And DJ says to Liam, like, hey, man, like, you want to smoke a cigarette before we close the building? And he goes, yeah, sure. So as the 3 of us are walking out the main doors, I just see, like, a white streak go across. And I look at them, and they look at me, and we're all like, what the fuck was that? And I open the door, and I go out, and there's nothing. There's nobody there. And we're all looking at each other, and, we're like, what did we just see? And it took me a little bit, but I started to think to myself, there was that lady in white that Scuba Steve supposedly sees on this campus. Like, she walked maybe 10 feet in front of me. And that was a pretty unsettling feeling. And then later on, Liam and Dave would say, oh, they were a little intoxicated at the time. Like, they imagined it, it didn't happen, whatever. that same kind of rationalization thing we were talking about a little while ago. So from that point on, the basic moral of this story is I took Scuba Steve very seriously from then on. And I wondered to myself all the time, like, how much of the stuff he says is just him being crazy and making stuff up, and how much of it is real? How much of it has some basis in fact?